Okay, so let's continue there where we left off, bottom of page 188. Of course, in this book here. So we were speaking about Klipat Noga, right, which is the theme of this chapter 7, the neutral zone that has to be brought to elevated. When we eat, for example, to serve Hashem, and then we're elevating the neutral zone of the world, or the Klipat Noga. But the main focus here was on this idea that every action has a reaction, right? Like Newton's third law. And whatever we do creates something. It creates energy and creates indeed an impact in this world. So we, as the people who are in the driver's seat, so to speak, have to decide before each and every action that we do throughout the day, what we want to do and what type of energy we want to create. It's true in the neutral zone, and it's true in every other zone. But, and maybe this is why also one of the great principles of Hasidic teachings is Moach Shalit al Alev, which means that the mind has to control the heart. I think we've spoken about this in the past, but the idea, the idea behind this, of course, is that we don't just react out of pure emotion. Just because my heart tells me to do something, I do it. Because if I do it that way, then you never know what type of energy you'll be creating in this world. But if you think about reacting or acting a certain way, if your mind is in control of your heart, then you're able also to determine the best type of energy that will be created from that action that you are taking upon yourself. So,
Rabbi,
yes,
that's really also saying respond rather than react.
Yeah, right. That's a good way of putting it.
Yes.
Yeah. That's why they say in English there's a nice word that says response, right? The word for responsibility is actually a combination of two words: responsibility, right? Because someone who's responsible is someone also who has the ability to respond well, effectively. Again, to be Moach Shalit al Alev, to have his mind control his heart and guide his heart. That's a person that's responsible. So we have to have the ability to respond, not just to react, like you were saying. That's right. Okay, so let's continue here. At the bottom of page 188, does anyone want to read? Because of these dangers, safety fences.
Rabbi, I think that they're also talking in this about the depth of responsibility, of response, and how it affects us and the world, really.
Right, exactly, and that's the context. Well said. That we may think that one small action is just a small action, but it's really a huge action. Mm-hmm. And vice versa. We may think that a huge action is a huge action, but it's really a small action. I was just speaking yesterday with guests from Borough Park, New York. One of them is a Gerech Chassid. It comes from the lineage of the Gerech Chassidim, which had really some illustrious rabbis. One of them was Rabbi Yitzchak Meir Alter, who was also known as the Chidushei Arim, and there's a story about him of how he was once in a taxi. Taxi of the day was, of course, a wagon with a horse pulling it and a wagon driver. And the wagon driver tells Rabbi Yitzchak Meir Alter, the Chidushei Arim, listen, you're going to this destination. There's another guy who lives not far away who's going to the same destination. Do you mind if I take him with us? The rabbi says, of course, yeah, no problem. This other guy happened to be a very wealthy Jew, but also the stingiest Jew of the town. He never gave a penny to tzedakah. So here they are, the great rabbi sitting next to the stingiest Jew of the town, going to the same destination in the same wagon. All of a sudden, this Jew tells the rabbi, I have a question for you. It says in the Shema that if you follow God's ways, God will reward you. And if you don't follow God's ways, then God will impoverish you. He says, look at me. I don't follow God's ways. I've never given a penny to tzedakah. But I'm the wealthiest Jew of the town. How do you explain this, Rabbi? And Rabbi Yitzchak Meir Alter responded so brilliantly. He said, well, from your words, I can understand that you at least said the Shema once in your life, that you studied the Shema once in your life. Saying the Shema and studying the Shema is a big mitzvah. Do you know what the reward is for a Jew like you to say the Shema and study the Shema? Much more than the wealth that you have. But the idea was, look, this guy was doing one small mitzvah. You could say it's a small mitzvah. He was saying the Shema, okay. But for him, God considered that a huge mitzvah and a big reward. But that's the thing. Also, it should propel us to doing every mitzvah that comes our way. Why? Because we really never know, as the ethics of our Father says. That we should have mitzvah kala kevachamura. That's how the ethics of our Father says, that we should consider every small mitzvah like a big mitzvah, because we never know how God measures those. And it's true in actions, right? What Diana was saying now, that even a small action can have a huge impact on our surroundings. Every action can have a huge reaction. We just don't know. And therefore, should jump on every single mitzvah that comes our way and consider all of them to be great mitzvahs. A good point, yes. Okay, so let's continue. Bottom of page 188. Because of these dangers, does anyone want to read? Anyone? I know Margot's not here.
I can read, Rabbi.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you, Sharona.
Because of these dangers, safety fences in the form of ordinances and prohibitions must be established. Things that are not negative in themselves must be forbidden because not everyone is capable of dealing with them. The need for these fences varies. In certain generations, many things in the twilight zone of Klipat Noga must be declared out of bounds. At other times, the spiritual state of the generation is such that some can go so far as to involve themselves with matters that are on the borders of holiness and still remain within the realm of holiness.
Right, thank you. So this connects to the big idea that we shared last week, and that is that, as the generations go down, then we have a smaller and smaller realm of what can be and should be elevated. And that's for two reasons. Reason number one is because previous generations already did the job. So now we have less to elevate in this world, and then Mashiach will eventually come after everything has been elevated. And the analogy we used is like we're like dwarves on giants' shoulders, if you recall. And the second reason is also because maybe we have less tools. Maybe the previous generations were more equipped, maybe were more righteous even, to deal with even the very far away sparks from the far away places, from maybe the impure places that needed to be elevated. This generation is not as equipped as it was, spiritually speaking, of course, as previous generations were. And therefore, again, our job is quite limited in that regard. Doesn't take away from our job at all. It doesn't take away from the special generation that we are, as we spoke about. But still, that was the big idea. Now, what he's saying here, as Sharona just read, is that there are borderline sparks. And what this means is that borderline domains in this world that could be on the holy side, but at the same time also could be very dangerous to play with. It's almost like fire. They say don't play with fire. Fire can be something very good, can be something very destructive. It's a borderline type of thing. We all need fire. I know that CBT right now has a gas leak. So our mikveh is limited because it works on gas. So we all need fire. But on the other hand, too much fire also is not good. So the people who know how to deal with fire can play with fire, immerse themselves with fire all day long. But if you don't know how to deal with fire, you got to be careful. Our generation has to be careful with playing with fire, so to speak, or spiritual fire I'm speaking about, of course, or other borderline things. And therefore, maybe sometimes instead of going into the risky realms of this world, rather go somewhere more safe, in a realm where you can make an impact and really influence things and really elevate those divine sparks that are being lost, as Kabbalah speaks about. So this is what this is saying. And our generation, in a way, has been guided towards the realm that is safe. And all we need to do is show up and do the work. Show up and do that mitzvah. Previous generations could play with fire because they knew how to deal with fire. Our generation maybe is less equipped to deal with fire. And therefore, God guides us, okay, I'm not expecting you to do the crazy things that previous generations did. What I am expecting you to do is do the mitzvahs that you should do each and every day. You wake up in the morning, sometimes against your will, and you go and you pray, and you go and you do a good deed, and you go and you whatever it is, that the mitzvahs that each and every one has. But that's the safer realm that our generation has to deal with. But still, again, all of this falls into the big pot or bucket of klipat noga, that neutral zone. Everyone has their own neutral zone. Some neutral zones are riskier than others, but everyone has their neutral zone, and God expects us to show up to the plate and play. It reminds us, maybe, I think it was 1982. I was just rereading this, but in 1982, there was in a palace of the Queen in Great Britain, Buckingham Palace, there was a stranger who was able somehow to pass through the security and go directly to the chambers of the Queen, to her bedroom. And that morning in 1982, she woke up and she sees a stranger in the room. And she got all frightened, but she knew that maybe he's armed, maybe he's dangerous. So she couldn't just react, she needed to respond, like we were saying. So she picks up the phone, calls the head of the security of the Buckingham Palace, and she says to him, I don't need fire for my cigarettes this morning because I already have fire in the room, thinking that he would understand. And he didn't understand. Eventually, to make a long story short, they've discovered that the stranger was there. A cleaning lady came in and she sees the stranger, and she's the one who called the security, and they got rid of him. Nothing happened to the Queen, Baruch Hashem. But what did happen is that the head of the security was fired. Now, you may say, wow, that's terrible. He was a decorated war hero, truly a man who devoted himself to securing the Queen for so many years, and he gets fired. Maybe the answer is he got fired because everything that he did in life was to lead him to that point, to protect the Queen when she needed protection. And he didn't show up when the Queen needed protection. So everything that he did doesn't really matter if you don't show up. And sometimes it's true in life that God gives us this whole structure of life, whether it's a comfortable one or less comfortable one, it doesn't matter. But he gives us everything that we need and everything that we have in order to lead us to do that mitzvah. And we don't show up. And we just look the other way. So what's it all worth it? God, thank God, doesn't fire us. He's much more compassionate. But still, everyone finds themselves in the realm. Again, the realms of this generation are safer than realms in previous generations. Physically safer, by the way, but also maybe spiritually safer. So all we have to do is show up. God gave us all that we have in order for us to show up. And sometimes we miss the calling. But it's never too late. Every day is a new day. Every day is new opportunities, because again, God never fires us, and he believes in us time and time again, even though we may not believe in ourselves. But that's the idea here, that we have to show up and walk within our realm that is usually much safer than realms of the past.
Don't you also think that people feel good from doing these things, and that's another reason why we do it? When we're living like this, it makes you feel good, and
Right.
You're not thinking, well, what am I doing this for? You're doing it because it makes you feel good.
No, you're right. You're right. I mean, certainly it's a good side benefit, but I don't think it should be the only reason. For it,
Right. And he says that in the book too. Yeah.
Right. Because sometimes you don't feel good, but you should still do it.
Mhm.
But there's no doubt. There's no doubt. I wrote about this on Friday. There's no doubt that it creates happiness. And when you do good and you come out of your own bubble in order to extend your hand to someone else, it creates a feeling of happiness. Now, sometimes, we're coarse, and that feeling of happiness is not engendered as easily or as smoothly. But if we do it again and again and again, eventually that feeling of happiness will come. You're right. There's that. But again, we should do it whether we have this feeling or not. There's a whole midrash about this if we want to go into this. But we just read this 2 weeks ago when we read about the giving of the Torah Mount Sinai. It says that the Jewish people declared immediately Naaseh v'nishma, just before the Torah was given. We said to God, we will do it and we will listen to it. We will act upon the Torah. We'll do what you want us to do, and then we'll also study it. After that declaration, then it says in the verse that Vayityatzvu b'tachtita ar, that the Jewish people gathered at the bottom of the mountain. Now, the Midrash takes it in a crazy way, that verse, and says that they did not just gather at the bottom of the mountain, but God uprooted the mountain from its place, and he placed that mountain over their heads. And he said to the Jewish people, if you accept the Torah, then great, nothing will happen to you. If you don't, I'm going to drop this mountain on your heads and you'll all die. This will be your mass grave. And of course, they said, God, we accept it. And then God put the mountain back where it was, and they received the Torah, and the rest is history. But the big question is, why was God doing this? Especially that they had already declared, Naaseh v'nishma, we will do and we will listen. They already accepted the Torah. Why are you forcing them to accept the Torah with this mountain, with this terrible threat, when they already accepted it? The answer is because God was trying to tell us that there will be times in which you will be very inspired, just like you were a few moments ago, and you will shout out, Naaseh v'nishma, yes, God, I woke up in the morning today so elevated, so spiritually empowered, that I'm ready to do whatever you want me to do. But there will also be times where we will feel that there'll be the mountains of life on top of our heads. We won't have the mood to do anything. Let's see if you will say Naaseh v'nishma then. That's what God wanted to test us. That's how God wanted to test us when he uprooted the mountain and put it on top of our heads. He was symbolically referring to those moments where we feel that the whole weight of the world is on top of us. These mountains are on top of us. And we feel like doing nothing. So God says, oh, you're going to still say Naaseh v'nishma now? Or you're only going to connect to me when you feel good? So we said to God, no, don't worry. Even when the mountains of the world will be on top of us, we'll accept the Torah. God says, if that's the case, I'm ready to give you the Torah. Because receiving the Torah is not only when you feel good, when you're in a state of ecstasy, but receiving the Torah must happen also, even when you're not in a mood, even when you don't feel like it. So just to relate to that good feeling is always positive, and it's always adds. But we shouldn't do the Torah, of course, or fulfill the mitzvot only when we feel like it. Even when the mountains of the world are on top of us, we should still say Naaseh v'nishma. That's the big idea. And sometimes, dare I add, that when we do things, even when we don't feel like it, then we are really connecting to God. Because maybe when I do something, when I feel like it, I'm connecting just to myself, to my good feeling. I'm doing it for me. And when I don't feel like it and I still do it, that means I'm really doing it for God. So that's yet another layer of this. But I don't want to be the only one speaking. Does anyone want to disagree, share comments? Ideas? Disagreements? Anyone? No?
You covered it well, Rabbi.
Okay. Okay.
Rabbi,
Yes,
is
Jordan.
there a follow-up story to the story of the mountain over the people's head to kind of entice them to accept the Torah, that there's a later holiday, I'm forgetting which, where we re-accept the Torah without any sorts of enticements of that nature, but I'm forgetting the.
Right.
Esther.
Yes, that's right, Purim. So, yeah,
Uh-huh.
I don't know if that's what you're referring to, but you're right. It's fascinating. Actually, Purim is coming up soon, right? Rosh Chodesh is tomorrow night, and Tuesday and Wednesday this week. But since it's a leap year, so we have 2 months of Adar. Purim is celebrated during this month, but because of the leap year, we're celebrating it during the 2nd month of Adar. But going back to the story of Purim, so when we read the Megillah, we read about the great miracle of that was, spearheaded by Mordechai and Esther, who caused King Achashverosh to annul the decree of Haman, of his final solution of the Jewish people. But then towards the end of the Megillah, it says that, with that awakening of the Jewish people who fasted for 3 days and prayed to God and eventually had Esther lead them into this miracle, then Kimu v'kiblu Yehudim, that the Jewish people not only fulfilled the Torah, but they accepted it anew. That great awakening led the Jewish people to accept the Torah anew after the miracle of Purim. Now, what does it mean? What does it mean that they accepted the Torah anew? We accepted the Torah 3,320 years ago at the giving of the Torah on Mount Sinai. What does it mean that we accepted it anew? And what the commentaries really explain, maybe is what you're referring to, Jordan, and that is that there are 2 types of receiving the Torah. There's the receiving the Torah when God forced you to receive the Torah. Okay, he put a mountain on top of you, and you almost had no choice. Also, you were dependent on him. You were in the desert, and your only way to survive was if you said, yes, dear, yes, dear, yes, dear, yes, God, we'll listen to you. Otherwise, no manna, no water, and who knows what.
No quail.
Sorry?
No quail.
No quail, that's right.
Right.
Nothing. So you almost had to receive the Torah, but God wanted us to see if we would upgrade, we would mature to a level where we understood that the Torah is really what we want, not what we have to do, but what we want to do. After the story of Purim, we realized, gosh, with that level of sacrifice that the Jewish people executed or demonstrated, they really matured. They really elevated themselves now to a much higher level. And then they realized we need God. We want God. It's not just something that's being imposed upon us. God came through for us now in this miracle, and we realized that there's a whole new realm of our relationship that we didn't know existed. So they said then, okay, we're going to accept the Torah anew. This time, not just because we have to, but this time also because we want to.
Rabbi, I would suggest that when we talk about the Torah, I think we have to be very careful to distinguish what is in the Torah and what are midrashim. This mountain over the head is not in the Torah. It's a midrash.
It said so, yeah.
It's someone's interpretation to emphasize a point. It's not specifically in the Torah. It's just a midrash. So I just want to clarify that.
No, you're right. You're right. No, that's a good point. If we want to be more specific, it's Rabbi Yochanan who said it in the Talmud, not just in the Midrash and the Tractate of Shabbat. But you're right. You're right. And usually they come to bring a deeper point, like that point where, we have to follow the Torah even when we're not in the mood. But you're right. Yeah.
I like to follow the idea of that it was a chuppah over our heads.
Sorry?
It was a chuppah.
Chuppah on the head.
Yes, because it was a marriage ceremony between God and Israel, the people of Israel. And that image is played out bigger,
Right,
than the threat.
yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
so.
Yeah. No, you're right. You're right. It's a beautiful thing, but because you're right, in a way, and it connects very much to what we're saying. In a way, our relationship with God is a marriage, right? It's like in a marriage. Sometimes you do things because you want to, sometimes you do things because you have to. But that marriage began on Mount Sinai. And that mountain, in a way, had that image of a chuppah.
Yeah, but you hold it over your heads. It's definitely some.
That's right, exactly. And then they say the Torah itself was the ketubah, was the marriage certificate. That's why, it demonstrates, we're maybe deviating a little bit, but it's just so beautiful what a true leader is, how Moses was that ultimate leader. Because shortly after the receiving of the Torah, the Jewish people betrayed God. They cheated on God, so to speak, if we're going to go to the marriage setting. How so? They built a golden calf and they wanted to go with another woman. Golden calf. So what does God do? God gets angry and he tells Moses, hey, your children have cheated on me. So what's Moses' reaction? He breaks the tablets. It's just amazing. Now, most people interpret that, oh, Moses was angry at the Jewish people. He broke the tablets. He acted with temper. No. Moses, at that moment, demonstrated what a true leader is. A true leader is someone who's so in love with his people that he'll do anything for his people, to the point that Moses broke the tablets to say to God, they didn't cheat on you. They're not married to you. There's no ketubah there. Look, the ketubah is broken. He wanted to make the ketubah disappear so that the Jewish people wouldn't have to suffer the consequences of cheating on God, because really, technically, they weren't cheating on God because there was no ketubah. That's the love that he had for the Jewish people. He would do anything for them. Even go
Rabbi,
to pick their side. Yes.
But didn't they already hear that commandment?
Yes, they did.
Verbally. I mean, they didn't need the tablets, because before that part, at least in terms of the order of the parshas,
right,
God had given the first two verbally, and then
right.
the others were through Moses, and then he goes up. No,
right. No, that's right. Yeah, that's right. I heard that commandment, but Moses wanted to again change.
but it
things.
wasn't written down, so it's not the same.
Yeah. Well, maybe it was on the 10 Commandments, right? It was in the 10 Commandments, the commandment of do not commit adultery, but he broke that to show to God, hey, you have no evidence that you married to them. You can't punish them.
So Rabbi, when we talk about the Yeridot Hadorot,
Yes.
and you look at the generation that was at Sinai, and all the acts that they did that were against Moses and against the Torah, how do you reconcile that?
It's a good question, because you're right. I mean, for 40 years they're complaining nonstop. And what are you going to tell me, that they were higher than other generations? If we're following the logic of Yeridot Hadorot. So first, you can look at it in a simple way and say that it's always the few that make the loudest noises. The Datan and the Avirams, etc., that make the loudest noises. We don't know about most of the nation, millions of people we don't know about. So that's one thing. Second thing is that I still admire a nation of slaves, really. They were a nation of slaves for 210 years. They were slaves. Still admire the tenacity to follow Moses into the unknown and to let go of their mentality of slavery. It took them some time indeed, but most slaves remain slaves, at least in spirit, forever. They were able to almost transform themselves. That transformation, I think, puts them already on a much higher level. And third, I would add that I admire not just the tenacity, but I truly admire their ability to live the moment. Imagine, we're reading about this in this week's portion and the upcoming portions, but imagine, and I think this is one of the great lessons we have to take from the Jews living in the desert. So God was guiding them with a pillar of fire by night and a cloud by day. But God never told them how long they would stay at a specific destination when they reached it. Sometimes they stayed at some of these destinations for 24 hours only. Sometimes they stayed there for 18 years. They didn't know, which meant that when they came to a specific destination, and by the way, they had to every single time dismantle the tabernacle, and then when they had to leave, rebuild it. So sometimes they dismantled the tabernacle for a few hours. They stayed in that destination for a few hours and had to rebuild it because they weren't staying there for more than 24 hours. But what this means is that when they came to those destinations, they had to focus on the now. Now we have this destination. We don't know what's going to be tomorrow. Now we have today. Now we have to act as if we're going to stay here forever. We're dismantling the tabernacle. Sometimes they were right that they stayed there for a few years. Sometimes they only stayed there for that day, but they still lived that day fully. And that ability to really live the moment to its full capacity was something that they embodied more than any other generation. And to me, maybe that therefore places them on a higher level. I mean, especially in our age of distraction. We can barely live 1 minute or 10 minutes, fully. They lived every single day fully.